Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Speaking of healthy, it is so good to be out of quarantine, back in the office, and recording in our normal environment today. I really appreciate your patience and understanding over the last couple of weeks. Fortunately, I didn't wind up getting COVID or getting sick, and our family is all back to normal and doing well. But it has been a wild couple of weeks, so very glad to be getting back to some level of, I guess, COVID normal. So thank you again so much. And I wanted to also mention at the top of the show that we have a number of open positions all over the state, law firms that we are working with directly to help them find and hire lateral attorneys. So if you or someone you know is looking for a change, I hope that you'll get in touch with me. I'm just going to mention and highlight a few of them. In Dallas, we're looking for a construction litigation attorney, a business litigation attorney, and then also a private offering, securities, and real estate attorney, and then a corporate attorney. So those are all in Dallas. In Arlington and Fort Worth, Tarrant County, we're looking for a family law attorney and a personal injury attorney. Those are both trial lawyer type positions. In Houston, we're looking for a business litigation attorney, a plaintiff's firm, a briefing attorney, and then also a litigator there. Also in Houston, an estate planning attorney. So those three all in Houston. And then in Austin, we have an estate planning attorney, and then an education law attorney. That's a special ed position with a little bit more experience required there. Most of those are about 2 years or more of experience. And so again, if you or someone you know is looking for a change, get in touch with me. If one of those positions doesn't suit you, happy to visit about other opportunities or places we can go, because there are, like I said, are a lot of opportunities, and those that I mentioned just now aren't all of the ones that I know of and I'm currently working on. So anyway, Daniel at varsitysearch.com or varsitysearch.com/lawyers to get in touch with me. All right, today we are in Austin, where our guest is Rekha Roarty. Rekha is an attorney at Bollier Ciccone, a firm that specializes in both family law and construction and real estate litigation. And Rekha focuses on the latter, and in fact, she was recently recognized in Austin Monthly Magazine as a top attorney in construction law for 2020. Rekha is also involved in a number of professional and community organizations in Austin and throughout the state, and was part of the Leadership State Bar of Texas class of 2017-2018. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Rekha Roarty on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Rekha Roarty joins us right now. Rekha, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, this is going to be fun, and I appreciate you taking the time. Why don't you start off by just sharing with the folks listening a little about what you do and what your firm does as well? Would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been practicing for 6 years now, and my firm right now, we do a lot of different things, but mainly what we focus on is construction and real estate litigation, or at least that's what I focus on.
Yeah.
There's other sections of my firm that do family law, but I specifically concentrate on more civil litigation issues.
Great. And as we were just kind of talking offline ahead of this conversation, you were talking about a deposition that you were doing by Zoom and online. I definitely want to talk about that and kind of the broader context of it as it relates to how COVID has been impacting your practice. And we're recording this on December 17th for context as people listen to these later can put it into place as to where we are in the timeline of things. Obviously, vaccines are rolling out right now, and hopefully
yes.
Over the course of the next few months, that'll change. But what this sort of has been the way that you have seen things develop in your practice now that we're months and months into this, as how COVID's impacting what you all are doing?
Yeah. So actually, I'm based in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And one thing is Travis County, as far as I can see, is kind of taking a lot of really stringent protections against COVID and everything. So
yeah,
it's very, very encouraged to people to move along their cases via Zoom and via any remote methods. They are not allowing any in-person hearings. I think maybe for some serious, maybe like domestic violence or criminal issues they are, but by and large, civil cases are not going to the courthouse. Everything is on Zoom, and everyone's become pretty used to it and pretty well versed in it. But at the same time, then you do have people who maybe aren't lawyers or aren't judges or aren't mediators who are used to being on Zoom all the time, who you do have to get involved with. And I've had more than one case where I've had a defendant show up in our virtual courtroom proceeding, and they're clearly on Zoom via their phone while sitting in their car. So that's been kind of an interesting experience. On top of that, just having to remind people, this is still a professional setting. It's still a courtroom. You can't be wearing a T-shirt or a baseball cap in a courtroom, as you can't do that over Zoom either. So that's been one thing, is just trying to remind a lot of people that the same formalities apply, even though it's on Zoom. Don't be chill. You're still in court.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's so easy to do, I think, when you can just maybe, wake up a little bit later.
Yeah.
You don't have to make the drive downtown or wherever it was going to be. And you can just, even if you're going to go to your kitchen table and hop on to the computer, like there's just a little bit of whether it's the client or even the lawyer, it can impact everyone. Just this little bit ratcheting down of the formality, of the intensity, which can, as well as the preparation can have impact, right? So what has been effective for you in making sure you're geared up and ready to go as if you would be in person, as well as maybe people that you're, you've got that are being deposed on your side or whatever? How are you kind of working with your clients and those people to make sure that we're not, taking a little bit of a back step here?
Yeah, I think one big thing is just the psychological aspect of it. And I always encourage people, you see the jokes and the memes online where people are like, business on top and like jeans or pajamas on bottom. And I tell people, I'm like, no, I think being in the mindset of being professional and being in court, just getting dressed professionally is a really big step towards making people take it seriously. I think the other thing is to letting people know, if you're using Zoom just for a family conversation or something, using it on your cell phone is fine. But for court, make sure you're using a laptop, or at the very least, maybe an iPad or some other sort of tablet. But don't treat it casually, like, hey, I can just take my phone and, be in the bathroom at work and me talking and trying to do something. Like, no, take it seriously. And even though it is on Zoom and you don't have the considerations of having to drive to court or find parking and all that stuff, make sure you're treating it seriously on your calendars and blocking off that time, including 15 minutes before everything would start, just so that you can have that time to get mentally into that space. So I think a big part of it is just making people prepared psychologically for it. If you are treating it as if you would be driving down there, you're getting dressed, you're having your materials right there, you're blocking off your calendar, that'll help a lot in taking it seriously. Yeah,
no, definitely. And then you mentioned that a lot of your focus in your practice is on construction and real estate, obviously, a lot of which has continued full speed ahead, especially in Austin. Those clients, I'm sure, business-wise and project-wise, even during the shutdowns, those were industries that were essentially essential businesses and continued to operate. And I assume then generating additional matters of litigation as they would in a normal year. Have there been either just COVID-related types of litigation matters, or just in general, what for those types of clients, have there been additional needs that you've seen and addressed with them over these last 7 or 8 months?
Definitely. So one of the big considerations in construction, given COVID, is that materials prices have gone up exponentially. I think the
Yeah.
price of lumber tripled,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's like a shortage of labor. So that's caused a lot of construction prices to go up a lot. So people are having these issues where, if they contracted in January, February for a house, they agreed on a price then. Well, now here we are in December, prices have gone up and the builders are asking for them to pay more. So we've definitely had issues with that. On top of that, even if construction didn't shut down, even if the workers are still out there, their suppliers may have shut down or have slowed down,
Ah,
or their subcontractors may be like, well, even though we're allowed to work, we don't want to work because, we don't want to expose ourselves.
right.
And so there's been not only a material shortage, but a bit of a labor shortage as well.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And that's interesting to know. So yeah. Well, the last thing I want to ask you about COVID before we transition is just what are maybe one or two things that you're hoping will stick around in a post-COVID world when it comes to the way that we're operating as lawyers and law firms and within the legal industry, trying to put an optimistic spin on things and take advantage of whatever we might learn about ourselves and about the way we work here over the last year and apply it moving forward. Are there things that you're hoping stick around or maybe are expecting to?
Definitely. I think for sure. I know in Travis County, they're considering, even when things go, back to air quotes normal, they're still considering having a Zoom docket once a week. And
Yeah.
I think that makes perfect sense because for things like, a 5-minute agreed order that you're just trying to get entered, or, a motion to withdraw, or even just, something completely uncontested, there's no reason for someone to have to drive down to the courtroom, bill their client for waiting in the gallery, finding parking, waiting for, an hour of the docket to go by before their 5-minute hearing is called. I think it's definitely a good idea to maintain a Zoom docket just so that these shorter hearings can be handled in a more efficient fashion. And I know most litigators bill hourly, so it really would be a huge benefit to our clients if we didn't have to bake in all that extra time that they get billed for. I think that'd be great, especially for something as simple as an agreed order where you just need to be put in front of the judge and say, hey, everyone agrees to this. I don't think there's a reason to drive all the way down there. So I really hope that continues. I think even mediation and depositions, I think, are way more effective in person. But I do think it's nice to have the option of being able to do those via Zoom, especially for litigators who have cases that go all across the state of Texas. Texas being the size of a small country, it's like sometimes, if I'm in Austin, but I have something in Midland, it's kind of nice to have that option. Like, okay, cool. Well, we can all, just be in our office and handle this for some of the smaller matters. I think use of, I'd never even heard of Zoom until 2020. And so now that it's something I use every day, pretty much, I think it's definitely a good thing to keep using. I think that should be nice. I think another thing too is we've really shown that there's a really great way that lawyers can work from home, which I think a lot of people hadn't. When this all started for me, I was actually just getting off maternity leave. My son was born in January. And then so in April, I'm coming back to work and I'm like, wait, I have to work from home? I can't do this. I've never worked from home my whole life. And then I worked from home straight through September and it actually worked really well. And I was really surprised on how flexible things could be. I definitely prefer being in the office, but it's like, every now and then it's really, I think lawyers, even litigators, can do their stuff from home.
Yeah. And on that last one, I think that's one that for sure had been kind of thought about, talked about prior to this year in terms of, work from home or flexible work environment, or, maybe work a day at home and different things like that. And then this year kind of put that into overdrive and figuring out, can that actually work? And, I think one of the things that and having a lot of these conversations and talking to others, it seems like one of the, I don't know, key takeaways, but is that there are definitely people that can work just as effectively from home.
Yes.
There are also some that can't. And so, I think one of the things that not just for the legal industry or law firms, but just in general, I think a lot of times we get into these, it has to be all or nothing, all the time. And that every individual has to be treated, equally is not the right word, because it's not about that. But it's like in terms of a productive work environment, if everyone's situation is different, then we do need to address each one individually in some ways. And so trying to figure out, I think one of the challenges I think for law firms moving forward is figuring out how do we have a policy that's equitable for everyone, but also is practical in the sense that it, makes sure that we're getting the right amount of productivity out of everyone, and giving everyone the choices and all that. I think that's going to be interesting moving forward, because I don't think you can just go to an all or nothing. Everybody can work from home if they want to, or everybody has to be in all the time after this year. Like, that just is not going to make sense for people that are very productive at home. So I think that's going to be a leadership challenge that law firms are going to be walking over the next couple of years to kind of figure this out, because I think there will be a continued push for especially people that can do it and do it well, will want to work from home.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's not a one size fits all type of thing where it's like different people might have different ways that they're operating best. Like, I personally, when we had to, I was working from home just fine. But I think I'm best if I'm in the office 4 days a week, at home 1 day a week. But then there's some people who are awesome 5 days a week at home, or who need to be in the office 100%. So yeah, I think it is definitely something that law firms are going to need to consider, how to make sure they have a policy that brings out the best in all their employees. Because it could be, different things for different people within the same firm, but you're getting the best efficacy out of both of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good. Well, as I mentioned, I did want to transition and talk to you a little bit. And one of the reasons why I thought it was going to be really fun and interesting to have you on the show is that for the most part, and I think we're 60 or so episodes in now to the show, and a lot of our guests have been partners and longtime practitioners, people that have been practicing for 20 years, with a handful of people that are sort of in the 4 to 10 year range. But a lot of our audience, the people that listen, are in kind of that 1 to 5 year range. And so I love having you come on. You've been practicing, like you said, 6 years, I think, and you have that experience. You're not a newbie at this. You know what you're doing. At the same time, you're closer to those that are sort of just starting out, and those memories of doing that, I'm sure in that first year or two, are still very fresh for you.
Yeah.
And the environment with which you got started is more similar to theirs than maybe someone that's been practicing for 20 or 30 years, and what that looked like in 1990 or 2000. And so I'm really excited to hear some of your thoughts on these topics. But for you, when you were first getting started, what's maybe the number one lesson or one thing that you learned early on that you are super glad that you heard or learned, and it's become a big part of who you are practicing as a lawyer today?
I think the number one thing people should do is just speak up or volunteer for what you want to do. And that might mean even going as far as cold calling when you're trying to get jobs. That's how I got a lot of my clerkships during law school, was just go online, find a law firm that I thought looked cool, and email someone there and be like, hey, you looking for anybody? But I think even as a practitioner, when I first was practicing, I was exclusively doing family law. And I was working at a moderate-sized firm, but my family law section was pretty small. Anytime I saw on the calendar there was a simple hearing or something like that I thought, okay, me as a first-year attorney, I can easily handle this. I often just asked my boss, hey, can I handle that hearing for you? Or, oh, I see you have, this phone call or this meeting set. Can I sit in on that? And I think that really helped get me a lot of experience. Yeah. And I actually handled my first solo trial by myself after being licensed 6 months. Was I terrified? Yes. But I was able to do it because, it was you just ask. No one's going to hand it to you unless you reach out and try to ask for it and show that you want to do these things, that you want to be in the courtroom, that you want to get experience. That's the only way you're going to get it, is if you let people know you want it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's been a couple of years ago now, but I remember sitting with a partner at a relatively large firm, and she was really just sort of telling me a story about how they had to let go of an attorney who was smart and who was talented, but just the way their firm operated, was, that the associates really needed to go and ask for work from partners. And if they didn't, then they just wound up not getting work. And so just the way that stuff works, especially a larger firm, is you just look at the numbers, the spreadsheet at the end, and that associate didn't bill those hours. And, it doesn't matter that they are smart and talented, like they just did. So,
exactly.
Honestly, I think for a lot of lawyers, coming right out of law school, especially in those first couple of years, it's not just a intuitive notion that you have to go and ask for all of your work all the time. Like, I think that is something that they need to be told. And so I appreciate you saying that. And in the firm environments you were in, to take that step of going and asking, not just for work period, but for the work you want, for the work that you're excited about and that you're wanting to take on. I think that's huge. Did you know that was something that you needed to do? How did you know to go about doing that? Or is that just sort of more your personality and I'm just going to go get what I need to get?
I guess it was kind of a personality thing, but I also kind of get bored really quickly. So when sometimes I'd be sitting there in the office and I would realize, everyone else is in court and I'm here drafting this, or I'm just here answering some phone calls. Yeah. I was like, well, how do I go and get what I want to do? And what I wanted to do was be in court. So that was definitely, taking that initiative is something that I thought really helped a lot, because then people knew, oh, okay. And it was funny because I had another coworker who was another associate, and she actually preferred to do more of the drafting aspect. So it actually ended up, we worked out really well because I was able to do the stuff she didn't want to do, and she was able to do stuff I didn't really want to do. Yeah. So it's nice communicating what you want with your coworkers as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really important. And is there anything now, maybe within the last year or two, that you've picked up just from experience, or just sort of a new tip, or just something that you've seen in others now that you've done this for a few years that that you would want to share with the lawyers at home?
Yeah, I think one thing is, don't be afraid to ask even opposing counsels, maybe not during a case, but later on, for their advice and input on things. Especially in some of the smaller, tighter-knit communities, you run into the same lawyers over and over again. So there's definitely no problem in, building bridges with them, making connections with them. But so many older attorneys are super excited to help out younger attorneys and are honestly flattered when you ask for their advice or opinion and just say, oh, hey, I heard this. How would you have handled that? Something like that. Yeah. Lawyers love to talk and love to give their opinion. So I feel like, keeping in touch with your opposing counsels. I found too, if I have a case that goes well with one opposing counsel, and that was my first case or something with them, I try to follow up with them a week or so after we settle or close and just be like, hey, it was great working with you. Not so much anymore, but if you want to go to lunch sometime, maybe back when we can do lunch again. But I think building those connections really helps out. And my biggest source of referrals is other attorneys. Yeah. So I think it definitely makes a lot of sense to make sure that you're building those connections and talking with people. And, one case is one case, but you're probably going to run into that opposing counsel time and time again. No harm in building a friendship or a relationship with them. Yeah.
And gosh, multiple reasons and benefits potentially from reaching out to those that you've maybe just gone against or on the other side, on the other table. I mean, you saying that reminds me, I have this memory that came up that's just sort of burned in me. A lot of people know I had a prior career in athletics and college athletics before doing this. And when Scott Drew first got to Baylor coaching men's basketball in 2003, we were terrible and had come off probation and had a really tough year. We were playing Oklahoma, coached by Kelvin Sampson, who's now at Houston and is doing a great job there. But after the game, and Oklahoma won by a lot. And so, but at the end of the game, I was right there on the floor. I was working for the team or working for the program, and Scott Drew went right over to Coach Sampson on the way off the floor. So they've just finished the game. And I could hear him. He's asking, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of our team? Like, what do you think of what we just, of this? And was getting his advice as they're walking off of the floor, just having competed for 2 hours, and I just, and Coach Sampson was sharing some things with him. that totally stunned me. I had never seen that before. But I do think to connect it back to what you're saying is, I mean, when you've just gone against someone, they've just seen it. They've just seen that side of you, even something that maybe your partners or your colleagues at your own firm haven't seen from that perspective, from that angle. And so it's just a new perspective and angle that kind of that outside voice could help illuminate. I think that could be super valuable. And then, like you were saying, I mean, all the relationships and referrals that could potentially come after that. So
yeah, for sure. And you're right about getting some critiques and stuff. It's really nice to be able to get some feedback, because it's very rare that you have someone sitting in court watching you, being able to be like, oh, X, Y, and Z, I would have done that differently. So it's kind of nice to have someone else be like, oh, I saw you and I was there, and here's kind of my thoughts. It is really helpful to get that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you said, most people are happy to do that and willing to help. And so that's good stuff. Okay. So when you've had the opportunity to observe young lawyers coming into the firms that you've been at, what's something that stands out and impresses you about them? Something that the lawyers listening right now could emulate or could think about in their firms and in their practice?
I would say a work environment has no place for pride. And what I mean by that, pride in your work, for sure. Yes. Be proud of what your work product. But one thing that really impresses me is when especially younger attorneys are willing to do things that, they might potentially consider to be beneath them to do, like more administrative tasks, or even more like really simple drafting tasks that might be left to a paralegal. I think everyone needs to be able to be all hands on deck. Everyone needs to be able to help out, because, if it's 8 p.m. at night and you need some emergency thing drafted or filed, you might not have a paralegal on call. You can just say, hey, go ahead and do this ASAP. You yourself might need to do it. So I think being willing and able to do everything and not just what you might think is the attorney role, I think that's really important, especially in smaller firms where, you might not have as many resources as a bigger firm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's funny because we have talked, I think, a lot here. And I know I've told attorneys this all the time about, how you talk to and treat the staff in your firm will have a big impact on the way people look at you and your reputation and all that. And so, but taking it, I think where you did here was a little step further, is being willing and able to do all of the things that they can do, because there may be times where they're stretched thin or they're on another matter, and it's just there's only a certain number of hours and people, and like you said, it could be late at night or on a weekend, and you're not going to call staff in necessarily all the time to do stuff when it's emergency stuff. And so that's huge to being willing to do that. But not every lawyer, once they get that license in hand, isn't necessarily willing to do that, are they?
I know, and it's really like a little sad to see when you see people like, well, I mean, I don't want to have to organize that file. That's someone else's job. It's like, okay, but you're the one using the file. So if you want to organize it, maybe you should just handle that real quick. Yeah. And of course, like, I'm not saying like every single time there's that sort of administrative task, especially if you bill hourly, it wouldn't be fair. But I do think it's important to, at times, if needed, be able to step in and fill those roles. That makes someone way more essential than someone who's only willing to do, top level items. If you're able to do everything, that's going to help a lot more.
Yeah, no, definitely. Is there anything that stands out as just sort of a red flag when you see an associate doing something or observe them that you just feel like, okay, this isn't working or this isn't going to work, we have to address this right now? Or what are some things that give you cause for concern?
Someone who is not willing to take the blame when they do something wrong. I think that is a huge red flag for me. Yeah. And to be honest, I might have been that way my first few months of being licensed too. If you mess up, of course, everyone's horribly embarrassed when they do, and no one wants to be the person who messed up. But I think if you do something, it's best to just say, hey, you know what, I apologize. I didn't mean to do that. What can I do to fix it? Instead of being like, well, XYZ told me to do that, or, oh, well, I thought I saw someone else do it this way, or, she was supposed to tell me this and she didn't, so that's why I did it that way. No, I think it's just a waste of time to be pointing fingers at everyone. If something went wrong, just take the fall for it and go ahead and fix whatever happened. And additionally, I feel like people take you way more seriously if they know that you're willing to accept any sort of blame when something happens and you're willing to make up for it. Whereas, if you're someone who always is pointing the finger at someone else, people just aren't going to rely on you or trust you as much anymore. So I think definitely, just be willing to say, hey, I messed up and I can fix it. That's really special versus someone who's just wanting to point the blame at everyone else and never wants to take any responsibility.
Absolutely. And talking about taking the blame and then being held accountable and wanting to, make up for it or mitigate or take care of the issue that you've caused. There was a story, I don't know, I'm on a sports kick today, sorry. There was a story yesterday that I tweeted out. I thought it was so interesting. I had not heard this story before, but there was a story in the New York Times about an NBA player, not a big name player, whose agent had made essentially an administrative error quite a while ago. He was due to have he had a player option for essentially $4 million with the Miami Heat. He wasn't a great player at that time. He probably wasn't worth $4 million at that time on the open market. But he had a player option. And so the agent just needed to exercise the player option. Well, it got filed after the deadline. He became a free agent and he signed for the minimum of like $1 million. So it was literally a $3 million mistake that the agent made. But the story was all about how he let his player know right away the mistake was made. There was really nothing they could do about it right then. He has over years now paid back to that player. The story was about he made the last payment of $3 million.
Oh, wow.
To make up for that mistake. And it's just the story about how this friendship that they developed over time and how they were there for each other. It was amazing. Anyway, the agent's name is Bill Duffy. The player's name is Anthony Carter. But that story's in the New York Times just yesterday. I tweeted it out. So when you're talking about accepting blame for mistakes and being willing to do whatever you have to do to fix it and make it better. I mean, that's huge. And that's such a reflection on character and integrity and all those things that are so important, especially for your long-term reputation. I mean, and as lawyers, that's really ultimately what we have. Exactly.
Yeah. That's the only thing you can carry with you. Yeah.
That's right. Well, a couple of quick things before we wrap up. I want to ask you about when your firm goes about hiring lawyers. What are a couple of things that are important, do you feel like, in candidates, maybe that you see on resumes or in interviews? What are some things that stand out, maybe positively and negatively?
So definitely positively, just how people are in an interview in person, that makes such a big difference. Because at the end of the day, it's someone who you're spending 40, 50 hours a week with. Right. And you want it to be someone you want to hang out with or someone you think is cool. So someone whose personality meshes and just who seems fun to be around, even if they weren't a top 10% student, which I was not a top 10% student in law school. I wish.
Hand is raised here. You can't hear that. You can't see my hand at home. Sorry, but I'm raising my hand.
But yeah, that's definitely more attractive than just someone who had amazing grades. Because, someone can have great grades and I'm sure they're brilliant. But if they're just not someone who clients will be able to relate to or who other coworkers can relate to, we don't necessarily want them to be a part of our firm.
Right.
Similarly, I think on paper, one red flag is if people lie on their resume. And it's scarily enough, it happens. So, and people should just expect that, if you list a reference or you list a workplace, people are going to call that and just, of course, if it's confidential, they're not going to call your current employer. But, if you list someone as a reference and we call that reference and we ask them questions and what they say does not follow up with what it says on your resume, that's going to be a red flag for us. Yeah. So I think truthful is better for sure. And I think sometimes people think, if I have gaps in my resume, am I going to be able to explain it? It's not a big deal. If someone has a 1 or 2 month gap on their resume, okay, cool. Life happens. We understand. I think it's way more humbling when you hear someone explain, maybe why they took a couple months off work or something like that versus having someone lie and try to close those gaps. Then you follow up and you realize what they were saying wasn't true.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Being truthful on the resume, is, and what's funny because there are both sort of just black and white. Okay, you either graduated or you didn't, or you're either licensed or you're not. Those are kind of, but then there are also places where, things get exaggerated a little bit, and or maybe something that someone hasn't done in a long time and only did once, but the way the resume presents, like they currently do it or they do it all the time, and there are definitely places where, and I've seen that in resumes, and I'll talk through that if it's a candidate I'm working with, to kind of really flesh that out, because we want to make an honest presentation. We want to be, it needs to be a document that advocates for your experiences and for you as candidate for the position, but at the same time, it does have to honestly reflect, right?
Exactly.
what it is, who you are and what you've done.
Yeah. And I love seeing people's, X factor on their resumes too, about, their volunteer experience or just interest and things like that. I'm outside of work and my family, I spend a lot of time with the Junior League of Austin, and that's really important to me. So especially if I see someone else who does something similar, that's a connection right there.
Yeah. No, that's great. Absolutely. Is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you would want to share before we sign off today?
One thing I think is really important for younger lawyers to hear and to know is that don't feel trapped in one area just because that's what you started in. Like I was saying earlier, I was a family law attorney for the first 2.5 years of practice, and I realized it wasn't really for me. I loved helping children, and I loved helping my clients, and I loved, as a family law attorney, I was in court like 100 times a week. I loved that. But I realized it really wasn't the right fit for me. And so at that point, I switched to construction and real estate. Yeah. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, like, I'm 2.5 years in, I'm completely seasoned attorney. And now I'm switching over to a new area. And I was really scared to do it, but it really was no problem. And sure, there was people who were younger than me who were at the same level as me because I was starting a new field, but like, who cares? I mean, I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I took that leap. And I didn't feel like I was pigeonholed into something because that's just what I started my career in. Yeah.
No, thanks for saying that, because that is something that I think really concerns a lot of young lawyers in particular, and people that are thinking about making some type of change, is they do feel like they're stuck in their current practice area, or that, or maybe it's that if they don't make a change right now today, that they're going to get pigeonholed long term, or whatever it is that they're doing. And so I think that that's helpful and encouraging to know that it's not an emergency situation. You don't have to do it right the second, and there is a way to make that transition. And so that's helpful because I do think that is something that's a fear that exists for sure.
For sure.
So, well, great. Well, we've got some rapid fire questions to end our time with. If you're ready, let's do that.
Yes, ready.
Okay, great. Name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Honesty.
Yeah. What habit has been key to your success?
Organization.
Cool. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
I guess I'll say Slack, just for being able to communicate with people. But quite honestly, I'm one of those people who gets very sidetracked as soon as I pick up my phone. So apps are not, for me personally, apps don't help. But it's good to have them. Yeah,
they're more of a distraction. A lack of productivity. Your favorite social distancing activity?
Definitely, I like how on I think a couple other services have this too, but on Disney Plus, you can actually stream your videos with someone else, so you guys can watch it together. So it's kind of cool to be able to distantly watch movies with some friends and family.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. I don't know if I knew that existed. We have 3 little kids, so we obviously are on Disney Plus a lot in our house. But I don't know if I knew that. So I'm glad you mentioned it. That's a new thing. I got to try it out. All right. And speaking Disney Plus, movies, lastly, favorite legal movie?
Legally Blonde.
There you go. That is a classic for sure.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, Rekha, thank you again so much for taking the time to be with us. This was great and a lot of fun. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Hopefully next time it can be in person once we're in a post-COVID era. So, but thank you for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. My thanks again to Rekha Roarty for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, if I could help you in any way, if any of those opportunities that we mentioned at the top are of interest to you, please email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel here with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.